Hello, my amorous art sluts. It's Allison Moon, and you're listening to the Artgasm Podcast, the podcast all about the intersections of art and sexuality. I am delighted that you are joining me for this week's episode where I interview Abigail Ekue, a really special photographer who takes portraits of men that are really like nothing I've ever seen before. She is able to create an intimacy and an access to men she's just met that is really unparalleled in any work that I've seen from other photographers. She works with non-professional models and gets really close to them and sees things that only really lovers ever get to see. And then she shares them with the world. And I really think that she's something special. And I'm so delighted for you to hear our interview. But before that, a couple of announcements and a little bit of an intro. So announcements. Thank you, everybody who came to San Francisco Sketchfest. I had a great time. And the Hound Tall podcast episode that I'm on is now live. So if you're interested in hearing that, please go check it out. You can Google Hound Tall podcast, How to Be Good at Sex, Moshe Kasher. And also, I did answer one of the questions in the podcast. I found myself not happy with how I answered a audience question, and so I answered it again on Twitter. So if you're interested in reading the answer to that question, all about female sexual pleasure and the advocacy of such, you can go to my Twitter. It's Hey Allie Moon, Allie Moon, and you can read my kind of threaded answer there. I pinned it to the top of my profile, so you'll be able to see it for a little while. Thank you to San Francisco Sketchfest for bringing me down. It was so fun, and I got to see some shows, and it's really just a great party, and I'm so impressed with how it's organized. So thank you, everyone, for including me in that really exciting project. And speaking of shows, I am going to be at the Mystery Box show this Thursday. That is Valentine's Day evening. If tickets are not already sold out, which they might be, but you still might want to check just in case, go to mysteryboxshow.com and get your tickets in advance because it will definitely sell out. And because it's Valentine's Day, I'm going to tell a love story. And because it's me, that love story will involve pegging and group sex. So it'll be fun. Come see the show. It'll be great. Speaking of love stories, I recently was digging through my files and I found an old love letter from an old, very significant lover who I almost changed my entire life to be with. I had the option of moving to Los Angeles for a job and London to be with this lover, and I chose Los Angeles. But in finding this letter, I kind of allowed me to reflect upon the choice that I did not make. And the love letter was absolutely beautiful, and I really enjoyed getting to read it, and I'm so glad I saved it. But it also started making me think, well, it's Valentine's Day week, so it might be fun to explore love letters of artists, see what we got out there. And oh golly, my internet searching did not disappoint. I want to talk to you about the love letters of two very different couples who both incidentally met the same year, 1904. But the nature of the content of these letters could not be more different. They explore the very far reaches of romantic love, from the animalistic, feral, just filthy sex lives of consenting wonderful adults to the exalting, sublime, godlike aspects of romantic love. And so I want to give a little bit of a caveat before we get started. So the first love letters are from James Joyce to Nora Barnacle, his wife. And let's talk about James Joyce and his filthy mind for a little bit, because these letters are shocking in their depravity. And I really mean that with love and respect, because I never would have thought this would be the case. But so kind of a content warning, I'm going to read some quotes from the letters that James Joyce wrote to Nora. And we talk, I'm going to say the word fart, and I'm going to say a couple of euphemisms for shit, because Joyce was into the scatological. And so we're going to contrast that with then the other couple. So, okay, but let's talk first about James Joyce. So obviously James Joyce, famous Irish author, wrote Ulysses, yada yada, kind of known for, I think, in modern terms of kind of popularizing the stream of consciousness writing style that is so unique. And that actually comes out in his letters, which I think is really interesting. So in one of the early letters from James to Nora, he talks about how filthy she is and how excited he was to find somebody who had the same kind of dirty mind that he did. And I love this because it's so reflective of how important that was. And again, this is 1904. So we're talking about a woman who really felt comfortable with kind of bucking traditional morality around sexuality. So this is a letter that he wrote to her. It was you yourself, you naughty, shameless girl, who first led the way. It was not I who first touched you long ago down at Ringsend. It was you who slid your hand down inside my trousers and pulled my shirt softly aside and touched my prick with your long, tingling fingers and gradually took it all, fat and stiff as it was, into your hand and frigged me slowly until I came off through your fingers all the time, bending over me and gazing at me out of your quiet, saint-like eyes. Hot damn, isn't that great? And I love that, contrasting saint-like with that she was giving him a hand job. I love that. And it feels so modern in its way too, like remembering how exciting it was for a girl that you're excited about to kind of take you. I love it. I love it. And now we're going to get a little bit dirtier as he shares letters. This is later in their relationship after they've long been married, had children. This is another one, and nice little quote. My sweet little whorish Nora, I did as you told me, you dirty little girl, and pulled myself off twice when I read your letter. I am delighted to see that you do like being fucked arseways. Awesome. Great job, Nora. So here's the thing that makes me so happy. I mean, that's frustrating about this is that we don't actually have Nora's letters. James's letters were donated to Cornell after his death by, I think, his sister-in-law, brother-in-law. I can't remember, but they were donated after his death. But we actually still don't know where Nora's letters are, and so we can only kind of piece together what she said to him based on what he's saying back to her. So in this, where he says, "I did as you told me," so she's commanding him to jerk himself off while reading letters. Which again, like, talk about modern texting. The parallels are pretty impressive. Okay, but now here's the real big one. Here's the one that it's going to be hard for me to read with straight face, but again, content warning. it's getting dirty. Okay, so here's the letter. Fuck me if you can, squatting in the closet, with your clothes up, grunting like a young sow doing her dung, and a big fat dirty snaking thing coming out slowly of your backside. Fuck me on the stairs in the dark, like a nursery maid fucking her soldier, unbuttoning his trousers gently and slipping her hand into his fly and fiddling with his shirt and feeling it getting wet and then pulling it gently up and fiddling with his two bursting balls and at last pulling out boldly the Mickey she loves to handle and frigging it for him softly, murmuring into his ear dirty words and dirty stories that other girls told her and dirty things she said, and all the time pissing her drawers with pleasure and letting off soft, warm, quiet little farts. I mean, it's amazing. And what I love so much about this is, if you read Ulysses, this is a very similar passage in style and rhythm to that whole book. And I love that in his love letters, even, it's clear that Ulysses was not necessarily some sort of pretentious pose, that this is the way he writes even intimate love letters to his wife. Now, I also want to be clear that these excerpts are taken from much longer letters, and a lot of the letters are just as filthy. That last chunk that I just read actually was just the tail end, so to speak, of a much longer kind of stream of consciousness sex fantasy that he had. And I love it because it's rhythmic and it's so repetitive, and it's Joycean, which I think is great to see Joyce's literary talents that, the public is aware of be applied to these love letters. But what I think is so beautiful is that you get a sense of James Joyce as a man and as a lover in this really intimate way, not just through the kind of filthiness, but also seeing that he was a jealous man, but he also had some cuckold fantasies, and he was submissive, and he asked for Nora to punish him in different ways. And there was a really beautiful part of one of his letters where he kind of feels a little bit maybe insecure about all of the stuff he had just shared, which again, very common. You feel intimate, you're sharing this really naughty stuff from your brain, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, maybe this was too much. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I shared too much. this one little bit that I love at the very end of one of his letters. He says, "Don't be angry, dear, dear Nora, my little wildflower of the hedges. I love your body, long for it, dream of it. Speak to me, dear lips that I have kissed in tears. If this filth I have written insults you, bring me to my senses again with a lash as you have done before. God help me. I love you, Nora, and it seems that this too is part of my love. Forgive me, forgive me." And to me, that adds so much dimension and fleshes out this relationship, because it's not just like naughty letters with sex fantasies. It's understanding that these are within a marriage and these are within a love relationship. And there's this desperate wanting and this desperate need and this also desire to supplicate oneself before a lover that is, I think, a fairly universal situation. And I love him for being so open and so exposed in this way to his wife. And again, it does really beg to see her letters back to him. But again, maybe time will reveal those, but who knows? Now, those excerpts that I've just read are from a book called The Selected Letters of James Joyce, which is out of print, but because the internet, you can still find used copies fairly easily, although they might be a little bit more expensive than you'd expect. But if you're looking to read more about these letters, I definitely recommend it. You can also see a lot of them are reprinted on the web, so just Google James Joyce love letters and you're going to find the filthy excerpts, but you'll also find the lengthier excerpts. I think the Paris Review had a selection of them that was fairly long, and then Brain Pickings also covered some of the more romantic and a little bit less salacious details. Let's now contrast this with some of the most, I don't even know how, just exalting love letters between two lovers that it's a really unique relationship. So this is between Khalil Gibran and Mary Haskell. Now, their relationship was absolutely different from James and Nora's, most significantly in that they were never married. Their relationship was very unique, especially, again, they met in 1904, same year that James and Nora met, but their relationship took a very different turn. He was Khalil Gibran was a Lebanese-American writer and artist, most popularly known in the States, at least, for a book called The Prophet. It wasn't really a critical success at its time, but it became a real hit in the 1960s counterculture. So if you're my age, you probably had a copy of it on the shelf because your parents owned it. So Khalil met Mary when I think he was in his early 20s, maybe 21 or 22. And Mary was a philanthropist, and she took an immediate shine to Khalil. And they created this deep, intense relationship, and she became his patron. And what's so fascinating about this is that she's 12 years older than him, and yet their relationship becomes real deep, real fast. And they are beloveds, and you can see it in every word that they write, and yet they never married. I don't know if they ever became actually lovers. They spent a lot of time apart, but the letters that they share to each other are really something. They're collected in a book called Beloved Prophet, The Love Letters of Khalil Gibran and Mary Haskell, and her private journal. So let me just share a couple of excerpts from these letters. So this first one is from Khalil to Mary. And he says, "When I am unhappy, dear Mary, I read your letters. When the mist overwhelms the I in me, I take 2 or 3 letters out of the little box and reread them. They remind me of my true self. They make me overlook all that is not high and beautiful in life. Each and every one of us, dear Mary, must have a resting place somewhere. The resting place of my soul is a beautiful grove where my knowledge of you lives." And then in a different letter, he closes it with saying, "I kiss your hand, dear Mary, and in kissing your hand, I bless myself." And this is kind of what I mean by the contrast of these two couples and the way that they talk to each other, because his love and his reverence for Mary is this godlike love. It's this kind of exalting, timeless, bodiless love. It's this understanding of space and fantasy as being incredibly part of love, and finding solace in another person's, not even necessarily their touch, but in just the knowing of their love being present to you. And a lot of times, because they spend so much time apart, they're constantly talking about their love being this meeting place, this kind of psychic meeting place for them to be at peace and be together. And then he does get more passionate, but even the passion comes from a place of, if you've read The Prophet, or if you've read any of his other stuff, you will recognize this again being very indicative of his style of kind of the collapsing of, or the intricate weaving of the human and the divine. So this one letter, he says, "Your last letter is a flame, a winged globe, a wave from that island of strange music. Do you not know what it is to burn, and to know while burning that you are freeing yourself from everything around you? Oh, there is no greater joy than the joy of fire. And now let me cry out with all the voices in me that I love you." So Khalil wanted to marry Mary. And he proposed to her the night before her 37th birthday, which again means he was 25. And she immediately said no, because she was just too old for him. They loved each other deeply, but in her mind and in the world, there's just no way for that age gap to be justified, which is horrifying in some respects, but also kind of modern. I mean, the idea of a 12-year age gap is still commented on when the woman is older than the man in hetero relationships. But then the next day, on her birthday, she actually decided to agree and marry him. And they share letters back and forth, and kind of she talks about this in her journal. And what I love, again, about the fact that she kept this journal, she's an elegant writer in her own respect, and she talks very frankly about understanding the limitations of the possibilities of their love, but also how their love transcends them. So this is from her in her journal about why she said no to him. "Not my age constitutes the objection, but the fact that for Khalil there waits a different love from that he bears me, an apocalypse of love, and that shall be his marriage. His greatest work will come out of that, his greatest happiness, his new full life, and it is not many years distant. Toward the woman of that love, I am but a step, and though my susceptible eyes weep, I think of her with joy. And I don't want to have Khalil because I know she is growing somewhere for him and that he is growing for her." This is what makes Khalil and Mary kind of these amazing figures in at least my world around non-monogamy. And it also, I think, is not necessarily just non-monogamy, but even serial monogamy. I think a lot of us have had the experience, especially those of us who are old enough to have had a series of love relationships, where you know that you enjoy that person and they enjoy you, but you're just not the right fit for each other at that point in your lives. And there's an exquisite pain to acknowledging that. I mean, the lovership with that person in London I was talking about, that was that relationship. I loved him madly, and I knew that I wasn't going to marry him. And that was a really intense moment of, I think, for me to recognize, oh, this is what it is to be an adult. This is what it is to make adult choices in romance, that it's not just about we are hot for each other and we love each other's company and we're fun together. It's do we have the same ideas of future together? And finding the rationality amidst the emotions, and that is really key. And what's so cool about this relationship between Mary and Khalil is that this is kind of a foundational element for her. Again, for a woman in this era, to be able to have that much wherewithal about what her values were about love. And so in some ways it does feel very sad that she's kind of saying, I can't have you because you should be saving yourself for somebody later, somebody more appropriate for you. But there's also this kind of intensity of non-possessiveness that is throughout their entire relationship, their diary entries, their letters to each other. Khalil talks about this in some of his own musings on romantic love, about this, that you never get to own somebody else. You never get to possess them. That is the opposite of love. And that being able to appreciate their spirit and their grace without owning them is really where the power of great love comes from. And I think it's a very hard thing for a lot of people to process. But for me, as a sex educator and as a person who's non-monogamous, I feel like I get to practice, I get to exercise those muscles of non-possessiveness pretty much all the time. Sometimes it's harder than other times, but I think that to me is this ideal. It's this extraordinary amount of grace and patience and dignity in not dictating the terms of a relationship. And for me, and this is where it ties really beautifully into Artgasm, is understanding that Mary was his patron this entire time. And so she checked in about him on his work, and she checked in about how he was doing and things, and they shared these really wonderful loves from a distance. There's this one beautiful piece that felt very, very indicative of the ways that some of my lovers have spoken to me. Again, this is kind of these modern resonances of a 100-year-old relationship. So Mary at one point writes to Khalil, "What are you writing? And how does it go? And what are you thinking about? And how does it go? And what do you want to talk with me about? And how do you go? And why aren't your arms 6 hours long to reach to Boston? And when will you come to me in a dream and make night sweeter than night?" And more on this kind of thread of her supporting him and supporting his ambitions and his work. She writes at one point, "I don't even want you to be a poet or painter. I want you to be whatever you are led or impelled to become. Nothing you become will disappoint me. I have no preconception that I'd like to see you do or be. I have no desire to foresee you, only to discover you. You can't disappoint me." Which, like, holy shit. Like, as again, like, can you imagine more affirming words from a person who loves your work? It's so elegant and so beautiful in its kind of largesse. And kind of just to drive this point home of her non-possessive love for him, she at one point says, "God lends me his heart to love you with. I asked for it when I found my own was too small, and it really holds you and leaves you room to grow." So this relationship continued for many, many years, and then 10 years into their relationship, he wrote this, and I'm going to close this part with this piece that he wrote to her. "You have the great gift of understanding, beloved Mary. You are a life giver, Mary. You are like the Great Spirit who befriends man not only to share his life, but to add to it. My knowing you is the greatest thing in my days and nights, a miracle quite outside the natural order of things." So yeah, I definitely recommend you check out that book. If these love letters made you all swoony like they made me, check out the book Beloved Prophet, the love letters of Khalil Gibran and Mary Haskell, and her private journal. And if you just want to read more quotes from the book, I got all of this from a piece on Brain Pickings, a really essential, amazing website that is just this treasure trove of brilliance that is very, like, I think spiritually the impetus behind Artgasm. So it's brainpickings.org, and if you look up Khalil Gibran, you'll find this and a lot of other pieces actually about Khalil's work, which is great. But what I loved about these letters too, like I said, is that these were written about 100 years ago, and yet, you know, from my own experiences of romantic texts and love letters and emails, there's so many similarities in the ways that we kind of describe what it feels like to desire somebody, what it feels like to think about them from a distance, to kind of almost fetishize that distance, but at the same time yearn to be close to one another. When my partner and I were first getting together, we wrote each other love emails in the form of erotic stories where we were fantasizing about what we would do to each other the next time we saw each other, because we were in a long distance relationship. And for, I think, one of the early Christmases that we were together, my partner printed them out and bound them in this really beautiful little book. And so now I have this gorgeous book of the very first exchanges we sent to each other as romantic partners. And it's a cherished item in my life. And at the same time, I love keeping love letters from all sorts of people. And I love, again, like, these kind of physical objects are always something that we talk about a lot on Artgasm. But again, the ability to just stumble upon a love letter from a man I knew 20 years ago, or stumble upon the cards and the sweet notes, and sometimes, if you're lucky, the text threads that you've held on to, because, you know, when you upgrade your phone, sometimes you lose them. But I love that, and I love being able to revisit that, because just like being able to look through a photo album helps you remember these beautiful times that you may have forgotten, I think being able to remember these emotions and to be able to remember the delectable agony of desire and maybe fraught love is something so amazing. And again, I think this is when we're able to kind of amass a series of romances so that we can maybe have outgrown them but look back on them with respect and appreciation for what they did, kind of like what Mary was suggesting to Khalil around how she was but merely a woman on the way to his eventual wife. We are all that for somebody until we find somebody we want to be with for the long haul. But until then, we are all just stepping stones and learning opportunities and opportunities to connect and explore emotions and depth and intimacy with other people, while we're all on our way to doing that again with somebody else and learning new things. And I love that there's a timelessness to that. There is a ahistoricality to that. There is a ability that won't change, no matter how technology changes and no matter how we communicate with each other changes. There is still this quality of the kind of understanding that part of love is letting go and is offering each other opportunities to grow inside of love and outside of it. Ah, love, love, love. All right, so let's go on to the interview. So Abigail Ekue is a really fantastic photographer. She has a couple of books online, so when you'll get her URLs at the end of this, but do check them out. Her photographs are very intimate, and what I love about them is how Abigail, talking about her work, she's so practical and at the same time so reverent of the relationship between the photographer and the model. And so I think you'll hear a little bit more about that as she talks about her process. So in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me, and please enjoy my conversation with Abigail Ekue. Hi, Abigail. Thanks so much for joining me, and thanks for finding me and this podcast. I saw your portfolio, and I was so thrilled because your work is gorgeous, and I would love for you to share with us a little bit about what essentially is the main thrust of your work.
My main thrust is I love the idea of capturing people and capturing emotion. And I have I guess you could say, very high interest in bodies in general, because I've always loved medicine and anatomy, physiology. So the whole male nude thing came about only because I was just trying to expand my portfolio away from just regular portraits or event photography and stuff like that. So I said, let me start shooting nudes, and the male nudes are what took off. The male nudes are what I got the most response to. So I just kept going with that. But I didn't start it out as a project. Even when it took off, it wasn't necessarily a project. I wanted, how do I describe it? I wanted to capture like really, I guess, emotional and editorial style photos of men, stuff that you just didn't see much of before, like things that could tell stories. Yeah, so that's how it came about.
I was so moved by the work because I didn't really know what to expect, because the cover of the book, or at least one of the books, is called Bare Men, and it's this male torso, and I thought, okay, it's going to be like sexy men being sexy, and I found myself really pleasantly surprised by how the models you work with were mostly older, mostly non-traditional, like editorial handsome. And the portraits were so sweet. I felt like I was looking at them as though I were their wife or their girlfriend on like a languid, sun-drenched Saturday morning in bed or taking a shower. I feel like oftentimes when we talk about portrait photography, we often kind of use the word intimacy and feeling, oh, this was a very intimate portrait. But seeing your pictures was one of the first times I actually truly understood what that meant, to really look at a model as though you were intimate with them, especially a male nude, and seeing them in a very soft and very sensual way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So tell me about finding your models, especially in a way where you could kind of get access to them in this very soft, intimate way.
In the beginning, it was people that I knew. Like I said, when I first started building the portfolio, I'm like, hey, I want to start shooting nudes. Do you want to pose for me? And, it took a while before people said, okay. And I said, well, the way I'm going to do it is the same way female nudes are presented: full frontal, visible faces. And then from there, I still have to work to get people comfortable with that. But once that happens, so I guess because I started out with people that I knew, it was a little easier for them because they knew me. And then from there, it was like, okay, I ran out of people to ask, or people who would be comfortable doing it with those terms. So then I went to Craigslist. This was back maybe 2012, 2013, when you could still find, I guess, pretty good people there. Hey, female photographer doing, male nudes. Sent them. At least I had stuff to show people, so they knew I was for real, and I wasn't just some person who wanted to see them naked. And then, from like I said, as it started building momentum, then people realized, oh, okay, she's actually taking these photos. This is not like a pickup or anything like that. So now, like I said, I never really had in mind the type of men I wanted to photograph. I just wanted all men, to be honest. So whoever showed up, as long as you understood the terms, as long as you respected me, respected the project, understood it was a photo shoot, this was actually work, I would work with them. So yeah, so now I think it's a matter of um, the men who contact me now, based on who they see on the website or in the series, I'm attracting those like men. So I think that's I think that's how the momentum is building. I would love to have some more, I would love to have some more black men in the series, or just men who are like visibly not white, but haven't gotten there yet to like get more people comfortable doing that.
Yeah, it was surprising to me when I saw your books. I was like that they were, at least visibly to me, all white men, and I'm like, what? How? I was so surprised by that. Do you think that there's a reason for that, other than you're just the people that respond to your ads?
I think, well, for some of the black men, I don't want to say cultural, but there's something that we're still processing and dealing with in our community, where the black male, the whole mandingo, that mystique. And I've also had some of them automatically assume, because I want to do a nude shoot, that there's something inherently sexual
Right.
about it. And then some of them, like, well, who's going to see the pictures? They don't want other men looking at the pictures. So then there's all of that. Yeah, it gets kind of messy, but I think slowly, like the two, I did have two black men pose, and they were fine with it. They are, I guess you could say, from my school of thought, where it's just nudity, it's not sexuality, and what's the problem? I just need to find the rest of them who are like that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was just talking to a painter, Alexander Rubinstein, because she paints male nudes. And she said one of the things that was harder about her for finding models was a lot of these men felt insecure being flaccid, being non-sexualized, because, your penis is smaller than, and your penis is not like, it's not your, the presentation of a male nude not sexually is actually harder for a lot of men to understand, because they don't necessarily feel like they're at their virile best, right? And so it's interesting to see how you have there's such a sense of humor in some of these pictures. There's a cheekiness, there's a cuteness, and some of them do masturbate, and some of them are playing with sex toys like cock rings or ball stretchers, but a lot of them are playing the piano naked or reading a book while kind of gently stroking themselves. And there's just the sweetness of like, I feel like, yeah, like I'm in like visiting on a Sunday morning where they're just kind of wandering around the house by themselves. And maybe sex is part of that. Maybe masturbation is part of that, but it doesn't have to be,
Right.
which I thought was really interesting.
Right. I do tell a lot of men who want to be in the series, you don't have to do anything erotic in the shoot if you don't want to. My whole objective is, pretty much capturing you as you are, or what you would normally do. There are some times when there might be a feature in their home that both of us decide, let's do something with that. So we might pose something, but most of the time it really is just very editorial. It's a conversation. I get them in the living room, or ask them whichever room they want to start in. Okay, how would you be sitting on this sofa, watching TV? And it kind of just flows from there. So yeah, that is the objective. Just try to get men as they are. And then sometimes I'm lucky to, get them really relaxed.
And what do you think? I mean, like, I find when I've modeled, I've always been very uncomfortable in my own skin. And it's what's nice about these pictures is these men, certainly some of them might have modeled before for various things, but they do seem kind of, very amateur. Like, what do you have to do as a photographer to get them into this comfortable place where they can just kind of feel okay lazing about, or, not sucking in their gut, or, something like that?
I think it's just the conversation. I try to talk to them as we're shooting, and knowing that I'm not shooting models. You don't have to be a model to get good photos. There is, yeah, I don't ask them to, like, prepare for the shoot in any way. Sometimes they'll ask me, well, should I shave? Should I do this? Should I do that? Like, no. So I don't put those expectations on them. So I think that might be part of what helps them just relax. Yeah. And then when they see some of the other work where, oh, so this guy, yeah, his body isn't like, a bodybuilder. So I guess it is okay. I think that all of that helps. I do try to make sure I tell them, don't, I'm sure they do, but like, don't compare yourself to other men in the series. So even if he did something in a photo that you think is like, oh no, I could never do it, I'm not going to ask you to do that. I don't ask anyone to do anything they're not comfortable doing in a shoot.
Cool. Yeah, another thing that I really liked about the monochrome book particularly is the age of the men. I'd say all of these men are over 50 at least, right? And I don't know, there's a sweetness to their comfort in their bodies that you might not catch from a younger model too. Because there's just, like you hear that, like that comfort of age, that comfort with oneself as one ages, and there's such beauty in that. Do you feel like that was a striking thing for you in terms of finding men of a certain age?
No, some of the men, like, 50 and older, or even like some of them 40 and over, they'll say, oh, well, I'm not getting any younger, so let me do something like this. Let me see my body now before I get older, See, what other, so that's been a common reason for doing it, turning 50 or being over 50 and, just wanting to get this kind of experience. And some of them, if there are people that had, I guess, body image issues, this is one way for them to heal it. Yeah, those have been, I guess, the two most common reasons for doing it of men of that age group. It's, let me chronicle myself at this age before I become 70, 80.
Right.
And others are, oh, I've been dealing with body image issues all my life, so let me do something like this. Let me step out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, what's nice too about, again, the monochrome book, your technique is really extraordinary, and you have this beautiful way of kind of capturing what somebody might consider, flaws or anxieties about bodies like wrinkles or sags or scars. And the way that those are lit, the way that you capture them, I couldn't imagine seeing one of these photographs without seeing the saggy skin or the wrinkles, because they add such texture to the photograph. And I think that that's a really beautiful choice to kind of not necessarily highlight them, but to allow them to be part of the frame as well, part of the body as well, without trying to pretend that they're not there.
Yeah, I like when I'm going through the process of editing photos. Yeah, the photos that are really, really sharp and really, like you said, they show all the lines and all the details. Those are the ones that catch my eye the most. And in the beginning, I used to be like, oh, well, they may not like that. So I would consider them a little bit too much as far as, oh, they're not going to like that photo. They're not going to like that photo. But like you said, for me, my eye is drawn to all the textures. Like, this is what the body looks like. So, yeah. So I'm glad to hear that someone else likes that as well.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting, I think you add this in the beginning of the book where you talk about your kind of remastering style, the cyanotypes. Can you tell me a little bit about that processing that you do with those pictures?
I don't do much. Usually I use Lightroom. So I'm usually just, if I'm doing something in black and white, so, I get out all the color, desaturate it, and I tend to usually bump up a lot of my blacks and contrast. I like high contrast images. Every once in a while, I will bump up exposure if I feel like that brightness will kind of bring out some detail. But yeah, in the beginning, I used to spend way too much time editing photos. But I'm glad that I've learned to just set the shot up as best I can in camera. So that afterwards, yeah, it's just a matter of just like you said, just bumping up those details, showing, like, I don't see anything wrong with, like, hair bumps and stubble and like, like you said, wrinkles. And so I kind of focused on highlighting that. And then overall, if it's a shot where it's more of a scene where, I can see more of the room, then I like to, if I can, I like to bump up the mood of that photo. So I do like to add film grain every once in a while, so it looks like a film still.
Yeah, I'm thinking one of the models that you use, you show him in a couple different places in what I assume is his home. He's got a white beard and he's like in front of his desk and he's standing in the kitchen and he's looking out a window and he's looking through like a record collection. And that's kind of where I like that intimacy that I was talking about. Like I really feel like I know this guy. Like this would be like the morning after we had sex, kind of hanging out in his house, like listening to records and making breakfast.
Right.
And there's something very sweet about that. I felt very much invited into those rooms. And I think also just kind of when you see these men kind of like feel a certain amount of comfort, even if they are like feeling nervous and all the things that you'd expect, once they kind of get into some sort of rhythm with having a task, or, it feels like you kind of get to see them be more playful, more cheeky, kind of have moments of just kind of relaxation, forgetting that the camera's there and just being, which is really lovely. So I'm curious about like your relationship, because you mentioned kind of wanting to photograph them like women. What about the male aesthetic attracts you in the first place?
That's a good question, because if I had gotten, the same number of women when I was looking for nudes as men, who knows where I would have gone with it. I think it really was because I didn't see enough of male nudes and not enough male nudes that were catered to my population. The nudes that are catered towards the gay community, or they had a certain look. Most of what I saw was heavily muscled, very shiny. It was, even if they weren't trying, I guess, to be erotic or sexual, they were always very inviting. But obviously, they weren't inviting me or my population. So, yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, it wasn't a conscious decision that, oh, the male aesthetic is what I want to see, but I guess that's kind of just what came out. It's funny that you mentioned that you felt as if this was something that would take place, the morning after, because I wanted to do a series like that a few years ago where I would take photos of men, but this would be like right after we were done having sex, but it would have been just one photo of the guy in bed. So I don't have that same connection with these models that I'm working with. It's more so, I guess, what are people like when they're by themselves or behind closed doors? I think that's what's attracting me. It really was more storytelling kind of attracted me, combined with us never seeing male nudes. And like I said, the full frontal. We would see nudes, a lot of maybe dancers' bodies, or there was always some kind of strategically placed prop or hand or limb. So, yeah, just it
Yeah.
was just something about it that didn't feel natural to me, didn't flow to me.
Yeah. That's fair. That makes sense. Well, it's interesting because even then, like, the focus on when you are talking about like male nudes in more sexual context, the focus is so much on the penis that I feel like a lot of models might self-select based on whether or not they feel like their penis is photogenic enough or, impressive enough to warrant an erotic shoot. And I feel like,
Right.
just my experience as a sex educator talking to men is there's so much cultural significance buried in the cock. And
Yeah.
so the rest of the man is kind of like secondary to the importance of the cock. And so it's kind of lovely to see some of these men, again, being either non-erotic or erotic. I mean, the whole book, the January to June book, is, a lot of men masturbating or being sexual. But again, their penises vary, and their penises might be small or they might be big or they might be, like, it just, there's a whole range of aesthetic. And seeing eroticized penises that have a variety of shapes and sizes is really also kind of, for me, healing to see, because it's not just about like these porny monster cocks. It's about like just men and their penises,
Right.
regardless of what they look like.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Did you find, in terms of the models, I mean, did you find that there were some models who were, because like the men, it looks like there are just two different sets of models between the two books, and the monochrome book has some eroticism and some not, and the January to June feels like it's pretty much like kind of wall-to-wall eroticism as far as I can tell. Did you have men self-selecting based on like, yes, I will totally masturbate for you, or yes, I want to use this, vacuum pump on my cock, or anything like that? Or did you find that like they just kind of like you were making specific requests or different ideas about how you wanted to categorize these two books?
Okay, no, going into a shoot, a guy will sometimes tell me, hey, yeah, I'd like to do some erotic images too at the shoot. So I'll kind of know going in at some point it's going to get there. But as far as the books, it was just the January to June. I did that. I realized that most of the people that I shot at the beginning of that year did do something erotic in their shoot. And I was going to have an exhibit in Vegas at the Erotic Heritage Museum. So I put that out kind of in conjunction with that exhibit. So that's why the theme is more erotic for that book. With monochrome, it was just, I guess, whatever they did at the shoot. But in my mind, I was thinking, what can be the theme of this ebook? And I said, well, maybe I should just do, I was going to do only black and whites. But then I saw I had some other, sepia tones and stuff that I could have put in the book. So that's how I came up with monochrome. The first book I ever did, which was a hardcover, that was a limited edition. And I'm definitely going to do another hardcover, but I would go about it differently. That one was just everyone I had shot up until that point. And I was, as you could say, young and foolish. So I wasn't as I wasn't as discriminate as far as the images I put in there. Instead of thinking about what wasn't actually a good photo, I was like, well, let me put this one in and put this one in because I think people will like that photo and I think it would look good. So.
Well, yeah. Well, that just feels like a tough thing that artists always have to deal with of like, is this commercial or does this represent my technique the best? Like, how do you balance all those things?
Right. Yeah. So the next hardcover book will definitely be a smaller book and it would just be, the best of the best. So it would be everything. Editorials, art, portraits, erotic. I had erotic and everything in the first book as well. So as far as these two ebooks, because I knew they were going to be smaller, then I had to kind of come up with themes. What can I focus on? The next ebook, maybe I will just focus on, again, the first few men I do at the beginning of this year and take it from there. Or I'm not sure yet what the next theme will be. But it wasn't it wasn't on purpose that I chose people, hey, if you want to do something erotic, let's shoot so you can be in a book. It wasn't that. No.
It's funny because like when I was looking at the title, what I liked so much about the title of it, even though it's very straightforward, like January to June, it just occurred to me like a pinup calendar, right? Like This is Mr. January and this is Mr. February, and seeing the different styles of that kind of put me in this framework of like, again, like even if these aren't men that I would personally find sexually attractive, like I was framing my mindset to be like, oh, this is Mr. March. What's Mr. March into? And that created like a possibility for eroticism that might not have been there naturally, because it contextualized me that way, and I really appreciated that. I also really appreciated, by the way, just showing some like men being erotic in ways that I wouldn't normally necessarily get to see. Like there's one gentleman who's like sniffing on women's shoes, and that was so nice to look at because I was like, oh, okay, like this is not a person, like I've never been with somebody who was into feet or shoes that way, I think, as far as I know. So it allowed me to kind of, again, that intimate portrait of what a guy who's into feet or shoes does. And that was really lovely. Again, it made me feel like very included in this narrative that I wouldn't necessarily know about. It felt like a nice little kind of peek into people's sexual lives. That was really lovely to me.
Exactly. You never know what, like you said, as the viewer, you're like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. And then you also, maybe you're into that same sort of kink or fetish or whatever it is that arouses you. And then to see it, that makes you feel good. I didn't know that he was going to do that at the shoot. Like as far I didn't know he was into shoes or anything. But when we started the erotic portion of the shoot, he asked me, hey, can I, I have something I want to use, like a prop. Can I tell him you can use props or whatever, I said, sure, go ahead. And he was like, okay, I really like shoes. So I said, okay, just do what you do. And that's what he did.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and again, like if I might think of into something, I can look up porn for it, but the porn is going to be a completely different aesthetic. It's going to be very designed to arouse. And so like it wouldn't necessarily give me the experience of what it is for somebody to be into shoes. It would just give me the, experience of like, here are shoes, fetishize them. And so
Right.
it was nice to see, like this kind of gentle understanding of, oh, okay, this is how this person masturbates, or this is how this person, finds sexual pleasure. I thought that was really lovely. And I think this book particularly is filled with those small little moments of, oh, cool, like these little insights into different men's eroticism, which is great.
Yeah, usually stuff we don't see. I don't remember. I don't know if I put that in the book or if I sent that as far as the museum like mission statement or whatever. But yeah, it was the whole point of that when I selected the photos for that was a glimpse into their moments, and it's not just this sit there, get some lotion, jerk, and I'm done. Like men, they have their own routines and rituals and everything that we don't really know about.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, I mean, it's so interesting because, again, like speaking as a sex educator, I've been very ennobled by the conversation around like female sexual empowerment that we've had and female like body positivity that is happening right now. And granted, it's happening because it's needing to counter like eons of oppression and, degradation of women's bodies. So I understand why it's has so much power. What's interesting, though, is like we don't have a lot of conversations about the way that patriarchy hurts men. And there's not a whole lot of understanding of male issues around body positivity or around sex positivity. It's a kind of always like male sexuality is potentially violent and is potentially problematic, but we don't talk about the anxieties and the challenges that men have around their own empowerment around their sex and their bodies. And just these portraits, because they are so simple and the men are so like exposed and so comfortable, it seems, with themselves, that like seeing a man who has like, for instance, one of your models has significant scarring and he's just kind of still sexualized and still eroticized, and it's really sexy to see somebody who's, again, their body might have had a lot of issues and trauma with their own body, and here they are owning themselves and owning their sexuality and being in pleasure. I think it must be very helpful. I mean, imagine you get men writing to you or speaking to you at your gallery openings talking about how healing this might be for them. Is that the case?
Yes. Well, I appreciate you saying my gallery openings. I hope to have more. Thank you for that.
There you go, gallerist.
Yes, thank you.
Abigail
Yes.
on your docket.
But definitely, I get a lot of emails like that. A lot of emails of people showing appreciation for what I'm doing, and they'll explain what their situation is. And it's nice to see someone showing men that aren't, like you say, model perfect. And yeah, like I said, even though some of these men may be really, really nervous going into it, they know it's something that will help them step, further towards body acceptance, because they know that they can be art. Someone will view it and find the portrait beautiful, and then in turn find them beautiful. So I think, despite any nerves, despite any discomfort, like you said, despite any scarring or, but maybe people might think less than ideal bodies, these men are out here saying, no, this is who we are, we exist, accept it.
That's great. So can I ask a little bit, you had mentioned your books and how you did ebooks. Like, I'm curious about, as a photographer and a fine artist, like, how do you find opportunities to sell, to make money? Like, what's the business model behind what you do? Are you finding yourself wanting to, like, do ebooks work in terms of bringing in income, or is it mostly like as a signal to other people to hire you for private shoots? Like, how does that work for you?
I think it started out, like I said, the first ebook I did was as, I guess, an addendum to the first, to that hardcover book, where I was like, this was the B-roll, things that didn't make it into the book. So it was more just, if you don't want to buy the book, you could look at some of these photos. And also because I didn't have a lot of outlets online to share my work because of male nudes, I have to try to get the work out there somehow. So that's how that started. And then, so like I said, the second one was in conjunction with that exhibit. You can't make it to Vegas. Okay. And it's an erotic exhibit at Vegas. Here's an erotic ebook. So do that. And then same thing with monochrome. I don't have another physical product in the works yet, like when I did that. But I had all this new work that I was producing that I couldn't share, you know, social media or things like that. So let me put out the book. So for me, the ebooks work more so as, like you said, I guess to get clients, to get bookings, and a little bit of passive income. For like the first maybe 4 years of the series, I didn't consider it a business until I met up with another photographer, and she's Erica Mueller, and she actually is doing something similar, but she shoots men and women. And when she realized what I was doing, she was like, "No," she was like, "You have to get paid for your work." So it took me a while to learn, like, you know, the business side of it. And then because I was always afraid, well, people aren't going to pay, you know, to get their photo taken and be in the series. She's like, "Yeah, but this is your work. You have to get paid for your work, you know." So, but she was right, because even though I said, okay, change the model, here's a participation fee, and this is what you get for the fee, people still signed up to be in the series. So that's helped. And then because of the series, I get people who aren't comfortable with their photos being published, but they still want the experience of a photo shoot, sometimes for themselves, sometimes a lot of men take these photos, you know, for their wives and girlfriends and fiancés. So that did help build private clientele.
So you're kind of doing like male boudoir photography
Well,
in a way.
not even boudoir really. It's a lot of it is the same style of bare men, but because they're doing this for somebody, they will have in mind certain images they want for their person, you know. Yeah, those shoots can be a little more planned or conceptual if need be. But bare men, I like to keep those as natural as possible.
Nice. And is this series of Bear Men continuing? Are you still actively looking for new models?
It's still ongoing, still ongoing. I'll be headed to Seattle in April to shoot out there. I'll be in Atlanta in March, but I'm not sure if I'm going to shoot or if I'm just going to have Atlanta be just a vacation and no work. I'm not sure yet.
Fair enough. So tell me a little bit about your other photography work, because I've noticed that you've done some really interesting series of, I think it was like female bikers, and also did I notice a like rodeo? I'm not quite sure if I saw the right thing when I Googled you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yes, the bikers. She rides. I love that. Okay, I definitely want to pick that one up again. That one was strictly a personal project. I wanted to do something. I was in Phoenix and Tucson. Wow, it's 2 years now almost. And I was out there for bare men shoots and some private shoots. And I had some downtime. And I was like, what can I do? I want to, you know, like I said, the whole point was to shoot riders. And it could have been cowboys, it could have been bikers, it could have been anything. I wasn't sure yet. Put an ad up. That was Craigslist too. Put an ad up. But in it, I said, looking for riders. Doesn't matter. One woman responded. She said, well, do you want to take a photo of me with my bike or my horse? Because I do both. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Nice.
Right. But she ended up, I think she got ill, but she passed my information on to someone else and said, hey, contact her. She could probably help you. She owns a bike shop in Tucson. I said, okay. Told the new contact, her name's Karen Cooper. I told her, hey, I'm coming out there. And I told her, I'm just starting the series. Don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I want to just take some portraits of, you know, bikers, since you have a bike shop. So she got the word out. And when I showed up that afternoon, there were 10 women waiting for me with their bikes.
Ah, fantastic.
So that's how I knew, okay, it's going to be a series. That's it. Women riders. So that's how it came. So every city I went to after that, if I had some downtime, I would look up to see if I could find any riding groups or motorcycle clubs, tell them I'm coming to your city. If anyone's interested in getting their portrait done, you'll get copies of your portraits. We'll take it from there.
That's awesome. It was so interesting because when we talk about like models self-selecting, you know, the male nudes, it's like a bunch of white guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the female writers is such a racially diverse but age diverse and body diverse group of women.
Yeah.
So the fact that they all self-selected too is really cool.
It was great. Yeah, I showed up. It was just 10 women waiting for me. I was like, ah. I loved it.
Yeah, and what's cool about this series too is kind of like with the male nudes, it's like there's so many details are packed into these photographs because you have, the women and the clothes that they're wearing and the way that they look. Then you also have their bikes and the way their bikes are decorated. And then you have the settings of like, what's in the background. And any one of these pictures you can kind of pore over for a while and just pick out these really unique details of like the badges that they're wearing or the stickers or the tattoos or any of these little interesting things that just add so much color and context to these portraits.
Yeah, I learned so much, about that world and about those people. Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun. I want to get back into that. But once I got back to New York for kind of an extended period of time, I did hit up a few groups here in New York, but timing and weather didn't really, work with us. But I definitely want to pick up that series again. And even me going in, I guess I had my own preconceived notions. It wasn't until maybe the second or third group I worked with that I realized, oh, these women, many of them are very, like, I guess you could say, traditionally feminine. Like a lot of them were into their makeup and their nails, and it was just something like, I guess I didn't realize. I thought they would all be very hard biker chicks type, but it was more so, no, I'm a woman who happens to ride a motorcycle. Yeah, they take pride in their bikes. They take pride in themselves. I love the sisterhood amongst them. It was a great. I loved working on that series. It was great.
Yeah, it's like there's a phrase that's really common in the queer community of like hard femme, and it's so interesting. So many of these women typify that very aesthetic of, they might be wearing a head to toe leather, but those boots that they're wearing are like stilettos, and their manicures are perfect, and their hair is like and like their earrings, and they look just so feminine and so sexy, and at the same time, that they could kick your ass. There's just something really interesting about that mix of the high femme and also the badass babes. Right. It's a really cool aesthetic, and it's kind of interesting because even contrasting with the male nudes. So it's like with the male nudes, you're stripping them of all sorts of artifice, and you're just placing them like quietly in a space. Whereas with the motorcycles, there's so much, again, like these layers of context, right? Like the fashion and the style and the presentation of it. It creates this really interesting contrast of like all of these added aspects of like, it's the opposite of stripping away. It's just a lot of extra.
I want to give an idea of what type of woman she is, also what type of rider she is based on where she lives and who she rides with and the type of bike she rides. So all of that I try to capture in their portraits.
So are there any other kinds of series that you're working on in addition to the Bare Men and the riders?
Oh, this is another one. It's not active, but I need to get back to it. Naturally Undone. That one is, I want to take portraits of women with natural hair. So usually it's Black women with natural hair, but you can't have your hair done. And that's just to show that your hair doesn't have to be done all the time for it to look good or for you to leave the house. That one I definitely want to find an older woman, or if she's not older, just someone who happens to have gray hair. And I think once I get a gray-haired woman, I'll be ready to, do an exhibit with that. So I'm kind of holding off on that one. But other than that, there's nothing else that's really like a series, where like, no, everything else is just, like private commissions or, like I said, a lot of the Bare Men stuff.
Yeah. No, so the other piece, does that, I had noticed it, but I didn't do any research on it. The natural hair, does that involve with what is it, Don't Touch My Fro? Or?
Oh, no. Don't Pet My Fro, though. That was, that's a few years back. That was me. I had natural hair as well. And at the time, I wasn't wearing extensions. I used to wear my afro a lot. And I would get a lot of comments about how nice my hair looks. But as they're complimenting me, they're touching my hair to tell me that. So I was like, but you can't do that. You're a stranger. I don't know. Like, stop touching my hair. So I was writing a blog. I used to blog a lot back then, a lot of personal essays, a lot of rants. So I think I might have been ranting, and I needed a graphic for that particular blog. So I just put that graphic together, a warning sign, don't put the fro. Then I'm sharing my blog post on Tumblr. Hey guys, read what I wrote, that kind of thing. People saw the graphic and said, oh, I need that on a shirt. So that's how that started. because
Oh,
yeah,
fun.
it got shared and reblogged on Tumblr, and people are like, oh, we need that on a shirt. We need that on a shirt. So that's how that started.
I see. Okay, cool. But you might have to wear it when you do the photo series or give it to
Oh
women
yeah, I have
little
to.
stickers.
Yeah, wear it to the opening.
Awesome. And one other thing I'm noticing when I'm looking at your website is you also have a series of interracial couples. Is that an
Oh
ongoing
my
thing as well?
goodness, yes, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's really really new. That one was supposed to be
Okay.
strictly in my mind. The idea came to me on the subway. I was just gonna take photos of interracial couples like standing like in the middle of the street, wearing identical outfits, but obviously you would see the physical differences in them. Then it morphed.
Sure.
I don't know where it came from. Oh, I should just interview them. So yeah, I've only done three so far. Two here in New York and one in Atlanta when I went over like Thanksgiving. So yeah, that's new. That's still ongoing. That's definitely still ongoing. But yeah, I haven't been actively seeking couples. Once I get back into a good schedule, then I can say, okay, I'm going to shoot on this day. And that one is, like I said, I like the photos. I want to be able to capture the dynamic of these two individuals together. Like that's the idea. How these two different people have come together, and then the interview is just giving us a glimpse into their relationship. And I tell them, whatever you're comfortable sharing, you can share. I have a set questions I'll ask, and then based on what they share, that kind of tells me which direction to take the interview in.
So interesting. So you were kind of talking about how in these projects you'll charge a fee and then they'll get, is it that they get the prints or they get
Oh, yeah.
like all of the digital files?
Yeah,
How does
for
that
Bare
work?
Men, yeah, they get the digitals, and they do get three prints. I send them two prints, and
Okay.
they can select one from their shoot.
That's kind of cool. That's a neat. I mean, it's a very affordable rate, and then of course you get beautiful photographs by a professional. That's cool. And is that the same case for the interracial couples too?
No, that one I only did $60 for like the interview and the shoot because I'm only with them for like maybe 20 minutes or so. Yeah, it really is. It's a short interview and then 10 minutes portraits and done. But yeah, I think I'm going to keep that. I think I'll keep that model with that series as well.
Well, it's great because I mean the portraits are just absolutely lovely, and so it's like it's a great deal as far as I'm concerned. If you want pictures of you with your sweetie,
Right.
that's great. Cool. So before we go, I noticed another thing that you did some writing. Would you be interested in talking about the erotic stories that you write?
Okay, yeah. Anything in
Thanks.
particular? Like,
Well, I'm just kind of curious, like what's your angle? What's your main again thrust in terms of the writing that you do?
well, for the erotic fiction, you mean how did I get started or
Well, tell me a little bit about because you have a one book out or multiple books out?
it's one book, but it's in the second edition. So the one that's available
Okay.
now, fifth anniversary edition, that's the second edition. More
Okay.
stories in it. Some of the stories from the first edition are in it, but I made edits and updated them. And
Okay. So it's the darker side of lust, correct? Okay. Yeah. So tell me about that book. What could people expect to see when they read it?
I hope that they see themselves in some of the stories, definitely. And again, I like giving people a glimpse into other people's lives. So, they don't feel so alone. Even if they're not like that, they know I guess, other people are having sex too and different types of sex. And also the the emotional type of roller coasters you have to deal with when it comes to sex. And also some things that probably make you uncomfortable. Like I don't shy away from that. One of my favorite stories that I've written is one that involves abuse. That this the main character, she's being abused by her partner, and she retaliates. And I wrote it in a very clinical style, so a lot of you know, I used a lot of anatomical terms, and just this her she snaps and then she goes into this revenge mode. And there's one of those stories that, like I said, for me, I like the way it's written. It's very dark. And when I first wrote the book, I read an excerpt of that at it wasn't an open mic. It was like an erotic showcase, poetry, short stories, whatever. And I remember the room was very silent after I finished it. And you could tell people weren't sure, like, how to take it. And then the host had to try to, like, lighten the mood and say, whoa, that's something where you definitely need a safe word for, or whatever, But I also I received a phone call from someone who purchased the book, and they really liked that story. And they were like, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be turned on by that story, but I was. So they were like battling with that. So it wasn't like I was advertising, hey, abuse is great. It wasn't that.
Right.
It was just, this is someone's story. And her abuse also, sex was part of her abuse from her partner. And this is how she handled it. But it's still, aroused some people. So yeah, all the stories aren't just, hey, read this and get turned on. It's just, this is life, that sort of thing.
Well, it speaks to the title, The Darker Side of Lust.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, and then I have other ones that are really sweet, so to balance it out.
Yeah. Nice. And are you doing more writing as well, or is that kind of a one thing?
This December will make 5 years, so I wanted to do another book, a third edition, and I figured I would do 5 years later in the characters' lives. But it won't be all of the stories that I did. I might just choose 10 of the stories and do 5 years later in those characters' lives. So I'm on a deadline, a self-imposed deadline, to get that out by December. Call. Yeah. If I want to hit the 5-year mark again. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So Abigail, so if people want to model for you, if they want to, model for your bare men or for your interracial couples or for your writing series, like how do they find you? What do they tell you? What's the deal there?
For bare men, they can go straight to baremen.net and on my contact page, fill it in, tell me they're interested. For the couples series and actually, yeah, just the couples or just private shoots, you can go through AbigailEkuePhotography.com. But also there you can select like the reason you're contacting me, and Bare Men is an option if you don't remember to go to baremen.net for that series. So AbigailEkuePhotography.com, you can hit the contact page there, contact page on baremen.net for that series, or AbigailEkue.com, and that covers everything. You can contact me there for everything.
Fabulous. Well, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Anything else I'd like to share? No, I'm just really excited. I'm glad you wanted me to, be on your podcast. I really appreciate that.
Oh, heck yeah. No, your I mean, that's the thing. Like, your technique is stunning. You're an amazing photographer, and your subject matter is really cool. And again, not something that we see enough of, I think. And so I'm just delighted that we were able to find each other. So thanks for reaching out. This is great. And so where are you based, by the way?
I'm based in New York.
Okay, but you do travel. So you're Atlanta, Seattle, other cities.
Yeah, I do travel. Definitely.
Okay, so if people are like, hey, I want you to shoot me, but I'm in Los Angeles or something, generally speaking, you might be able to make something work?
Right, because I can do my travel based on demand. So I'll book, maybe 3 or 4 shoots on a trip, and I can go to that city and do that. So that's what I've been doing.
Lovely. Well, awesome, Abigail. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. You've been a delight, and I certainly hope to see your work in more galleries and in more places.
Yes, thank you very much, Allison.
And that's it for this week's episode of Artgasm. Thank you, as always, for joining me. If you would like to support my work, please go check us out at patreon.com/artgasm. That's patreon.com/artgasm. If you know somebody that you think you'd like to see interviewed on Artgasm, please let me know. You can email me at artgasmcast@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at artgasmcast.com. And you can find me on Twitter at HeyAllieMoon and on Instagram at Allison_Moon. And if you're interested in figuring out when I'm going to be different places, I do send out a newsletter very, very rarely, but it does happen especially when I have events coming up, and I will be booking more things in the spring into the summer. So you can become a member of my mailing list by going to girlsex101.com, and you'll see on the homepage there, just, subscribe to your newsletter, and you'll get the first couple chapters of Girl Sex 101 for free, and then you'll hear when I'm coming to your city, hopefully. So anyway, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon.